Lucas Cade knew he had a problem with his mouth. It wasn't the shape. Human mouths were, after all, relatively unremarkable in the grand cosmic comparison, but rather what came out of it. As a Federation engineer stationed on the neutral world of Varna Prime in the year 2641, Lucas had been briefed extensively on interspecies etiquette. The bullet points were tattooed in his memory. No direct eye contact with the Moravi delegates, no exposing teeth to the Zanti, and absolutely no comments about physical attributes of the Karine. Yet, here he was watching as the entire diplomatic chamber froze in horrified silence. "Cute tail," he had said almost instinctively, the words escaping before his brain could slam shut the gates. The Karine warrior standing guard at the entrance to the cultural exchange hall went rigid. Her name was Saraxa, as Lucas would later learn, and the pale blue bioluminescent tail that had caught his attention suddenly exploded with light, pulsing with an intensity that forced several delegates to shield their eyes. Lucas squinted, raising his hand against the brilliant blue glow. Take it. That was the wrong thing to say." The 6-foot-tall Karine female turned toward him with glacial slowness. Her silver eyes narrowed to slits, pupils dilating until they consumed the iris. The gills along her neck flared, and the ceremonial armor she wore, light-absorbing obsidian scales that seemed to bend space around them, clicked as she adjusted her stance. "You," she said, her voice carrying the rumbling undertones that all Karine possessed, "have spoken the words of blood challenge." A murmur rippled through the assembled diplomats. The human delegation head, Ambassador Tanner, went pale. "Lucas," she hissed, "what have you done?" "I just said her tale was silence." The word cracked like a whip from another Karen. This one, adorned with more elaborate ceremonial armor, Commander Varel, as his insignia proclaimed, stepped forward, his own tail glowing with anticipation. "The human has invoked the tail bond. The ancient laws are clear." Lucas looked desperately at Ambassador Tanner. What laws? What's happening? But it was the Karine commander who answered. A smile spreading across his face was a smile that contained no warmth, only teeth and anticipation. "The human will be bound to Warrior Saraxa until the challenge is complete, by death or by victory." Before Lucas could process this, 4 Karine guards surrounded him. He opened his mouth to protest, but a sharp look from Ambassador Tanner made him reconsider. With surprising gentleness, the guards led him away from the chamber, Saraxa following behind, her tail still burning like a blue star. The last thing Lucas saw was Commander Varel's satisfied expression and his hushed words to another officer. "The human alliance ends." Today, the holding cell they placed him in was surprisingly comfortable, if one enjoyed minimalist design with painful attention to ergonomic discomfort. The angular chair seemed specifically engineered to find the one position that would aggravate his lower back, and the lighting pulsed at a frequency just disruptive enough to prevent his eyes from fully adjusting. When the door finally opened, Lucas jumped to his feet, relieved to see Ambassador Tanner. His relief faded when he noticed her expression. "Lucas, do you have any idea what you've done?" she asked. Her voice, low but intense, apparently insulted someone's tail. "Look, I know I messed up, but surely we can smooth this over. I'll apologize, it's not about an apology." Tanner pinched the bridge of her nose. In Karine culture, commenting on a warrior's tail is an ancient formal challenge when you said those words, and her tail responded, "You activated a biological and cultural bond that can only be resolved in one of two ways. Lucas waited, then prompted, "Which are your death or your victory in ritual combat?" He blinked. "Over a compliment, I said it was cute. The exact words don't matter. The Kareen don't differentiate between types of attention to the tail. It's their most sacred appendage connected directly to their emotional center. Warrior tails are meant to be unacknowledged, except in battle or intimate situations." Lucas groaned, dropping back into the uncomfortable chair. "So what happens now? Do I fight her?" "No, you're bound to her. The tail bond means she must protect you until the challenge is resolved. You effectively became her sacred charge the moment her tail responded to your words." "That's not so bad." Tanner's expression darkened. Commander Verrill has been looking for any excuse to break the peace treaty with humans. Now he has one that's culturally unassailable. The tail bond supersedes diplomatic immunity. As long as you're bound to Saraxa, you're subject to Kareen law, not Federation protection. Can't we just, I don't know, declare the bond completed and move on? No, the tail bond is a biological reaction, not just a cultural one. Her tail responded to you. The bond will remain until it's satisfied through combat or other resolution. Other resolution? Tanner hesitated. There are stories of tail bonds being broken through sacrifice, but they're mostly legends. The point is, you're now effectively Kareen property until this is resolved. Lucas rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of a migraine. So what's the plan? We are negotiating, but it's not going well. The Karen High Council has granted VL temporary authority over this matter since it falls under traditional law. And Vrol, she paused. He's taking you to their temple complex tomorrow. Saraxa will accompany you as your bound guardian. And then what? And then you'd better hope we find a diplomatic solution quickly, because Val will be looking for any excuse to end this the traditional way, which is your execution, Lucas. A culturally sanctioned elimination of a foreign threat. After Tanner left, Lucas paced the small cell, his mind racing. He'd read about the Karene during his orientation, but the briefing had focused on their technological contributions and territorial disputes, not their biological peculiarities or cultural taboos. The door opened again, revealing Saraxa. Her tail was now dimmed to a low glow, but it pulsed slightly when their eyes met. "Human," she stated flatly. "You will come with me now." Lucas studied her, noticing details he'd missed before. Her skin had a faint silver sheen beneath its primary blue tone. The ridges along her brow and cheekbones caught the light, creating an almost metallic glint. And her eyes, they weren't emotionless as he'd first thought, but contained a turbulent depth like storm clouds seen from orbit. "Do I have a choice?" he asked. "No. The tail bond demands proximity. I must guard what I am bound to, even though I accidentally triggered this whole mess." Her expression didn't change, but her tail flickered. Intent is irrelevant. The bond exists. "Well, that's reassuring," Lucas muttered, standing up. "So where are we going?" "To the Temple of Ancestral Flame. Commander Verrill has ordered your preparation for the ceremony of resolution." That sounds ominous. "It is meant to be." Lucas followed her into the corridor, noticing how other Kareen moved aside, their eyes fixed on Sarax's glowing tail. Some looked contemptuous, others curious, but all seemed affected by the sight. "They're staring at your tail," Lucas observed quietly. "The tail bond is rare," she replied without looking back. "Most warriors go their entire lives without experiencing it. It is considered either a great honor or a great shame, depending on the outcome. And which is it for you? Her stride faltered almost imperceptibly. That remains to be determined. They boarded a transport vessel that would take them to the temple complex. Lucas sat across from Saraxa, studying her as she stared resolutely out the viewport. Despite her rigid posture, he noticed minute movements, the occasional flicker of her tail, a slight adjustment of her breathing when the transport shifted course. "Can I ask you something?" he ventured, after several minutes of silence. She didn't look at him, but inclined her head slightly. "If I'm bound to you, and you're supposed to protect me, how does that work when the endgame is apparently my death?" Her silver eyes shifted to him. "The tail bond requires me to protect you from all threats except the ritual itself. I am your guardian until the moment of resolution. That seems contradictory. Many sacred things are. And what if I try to escape?" Her tail brightened slightly. "You would not succeed. But hypothetically, if I did, then I would hunt you across worlds until the bond was satisfied." Lucas leaned back, processing this. "That's intense. The tail bond is not a diplomatic agreement, human. It is older than our written history. It is in our blood, our cells, our ancestral memory. My name is Lucas, by the way, not human." She regarded him for a long moment. "Names are given to equals, or to prey. You are neither yet. Charming. And what should I call you? Saravel. Flame Guardian of the Third Order. That's quite a title. It is who I am." The transport began its descent, and through the viewport, Lucas caught his first glimpse of the Kareen Temple complex. Unlike the utilitarian architecture of the diplomatic district, the temple was a sprawling structure of interwoven spires and arches, crafted from a material that seemed to capture and amplify light. The central dome pulsed with the same blue bioluminescence as Sorax's tail. "It's beautiful," he said, genuinely impressed. Sorax's expression softened fractionally. "It is the physical manifestation of our connection to the ancestral flame. The light you see comes from the first tail, the preserved appendage of our most revered ancestor." As they disembarked, Lucas noticed a group of Kareen warriors waiting at the landing pad. Their armor was similar to Sarax's, but adorned with red markings. At their center stood Commander Val, his posture radiating. "Contempt, the human, arrives." Val announced, his voice carrying across the platform. "Bring him to the preparation chamber. Saraxa, you will report to the Flamekeepers for purification." "Wait," Lucas said as two warriors moved to separate them. "What's happening? Purification?" Vlad with a thin smile. "Both the challenger and the challenged must be cleansed before the ceremony." "I didn't challenge anyone," Lucas protested. Vlad stepped closer, towering over him. "Your words activated the tail bond. Your ignorance does not absolve you of the consequences." Before Lucas could respond, Sarah intervened. "The human remains in my sight until the ceremony that is the law of the bond." Val's tail flicked with annoyance. "You would instruct me on our laws." "Flame Guardian, I would remind you of them." "Commander." The tension between them was palpable. After a moment, Veril inclined his head. "Very well. The human will be prepared in your presence, but remember your place, Sarek. Your tale now binds you to an outsider. Your judgment is compromised." Lucas was led to a chamber deep within the temple complex, Saraxa following close behind. The room was circular, its walls embedded with bioluminescent crystals that pulsed in a rhythm reminiscent of a heartbeat. In the center stood a pool of clear liquid that emitted a faint glow. "Strip and enter the pool," ordered one of the Karin attendants. Lucas glanced at Saraxa, who had positioned herself by the entrance, her back turned to him. "Is this really necessary?" "The purification cannot be bypassed," she replied without turning. "It prepares both body and spirit for the ritual." Reluctantly, Lucas removed his uniform. He stepped into the pool. The liquid was warm, with the consistency of oil, clinging to his skin as he submerged. It carried a faint electrical charge that made his hair stand on end. "What is this stuff?" he asked as the attendants began applying ceremonial markings to his skin with brushes dipped in a phosphorescent substance. "The tears of the ancestral flame," explained the elder attendant. "It will make you worthy of the challenge." "Lucky me," Lucas muttered as the preparation continued. He noticed Sarah's tail pulsing more rapidly, though she maintained her position facing away from him. "Is something wrong?" he called to her. "The bond grows stronger with proximity and ritual," she answered, her voice tighter than before. "It is uncomfortable for me too," Lucas said, then added under his breath, "though probably for different reasons." When the preparation was complete, Lucas was provided with a simple garment, a wrap made of a material similar to silk, but with metallic threads woven through it. It covered him from waist to knee, leaving his marked chest and arms exposed. "Now what?" he asked, approaching Saraxa. She turned to face him, and for a moment her composure slipped. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of the markings on his skin, and her tail brightened perceptibly. "The markings," she said, regaining control. "They have given you the pattern of challenge." Lucas looked down at the swirling designs covering his torso. "What does that mean?" "It means the Flamekeepers have recognized the bond as legitimate. You are now officially a challenger." "But I didn't—" "What you intended no longer matters," she cut him off. "We must proceed to the Chamber of Resolution. Commander Val awaits." As they walked through the winding corridors of the temple, Lucas noticed other Karen stopping to stare. Some made gestures that appeared ritualistic, while others turned away as if the sight of them was offensive. "They act like we're contagious," Lucas observed. "In a way, we are," Saraxa replied. "The tail bond is powerful magic in our culture. Some believe it can transfer between warriors if they observe it too closely." "Is that true?" "No, but many traditions persist despite evidence." They arrived at a massive chamber dominated by a circular platform surrounded by tiered seating. The platform was inscribed with intricate patterns that matched some of the markings on Lucas's skin. Commander Val stood at the far side, now dressed in ceremonial armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Challenger and the Bound arrive, announced a Kareen elder, her voice resonating through the chamber. "Let the ceremony of resolution commence." Lucas was directed to one side of the circle, while Saraxa took position at the edge, her tail now pulsing in sync with the patterns on the floor. "Lucas Kate of Earth." Val addressed him formally. "You have invoked the tail bond with Flame Guardian Sorax by the ancient laws. This bond must be resolved. Do you understand?" "Not really," Lucas replied honestly, "but I'm guessing I don't have much choice." Murmurs rippled through the assembled Kareen. Val's expression hardened. "The human mocks our sacred traditions," he declared. "Let it be recorded that he approaches the resolution with contempt. That's not what I meant," Lucas protested, but his words were drowned out by a sudden drumming that filled the chamber. The elder raised her hands and the drumming ceased. The resolution offers 3 paths: submission challenge or severance. Lucas looked to Soraka, whose expression remained unreadable. "What do those mean?" he asked. The elder continued as if he hadn't spoken. "Commander Verrill, as representative of the High Council, which path do you decree?" Val's tail flared brightly. "The path of challenge. Let the human prove his worth or perish in the attempt." "Wait," Lucas interjected. "Don't I get a say in this?" "The challenge does not choose the path," the elder explained, her tone suggesting she was stating the obvious. "Only the cultural authority may decide." "That's convenient," Lucas muttered. "The challenge is set," the elder proclaimed. 3 trials of increasing difficulty. Success grants life and honor. Failure means death. Lucas swallowed hard. "And what exactly are these trials?" VL's mouth curved into what might have been a smile. On a human face, but on him, it looked predatory. The trial of mind, the trial of body, and the trial of spirit. You will face each in turn, human with increasing stakes. "And when do these trials begin now?" Val declared, pressing a panel on his wrist. A guard on the floor beneath Lucas suddenly illuminated, and a holographic projection surrounded him. The image showed a complex 3-dimensional puzzle, its components shifting and realigning continuously. "The trial of mind," announced the elder. "Solve the ancestral puzzle before the flame consumes you." Lucas looked down and realized with horror that the platform beneath his feet had begun to emit heat. Within moments, it would become unbearably hot. "This is insane!" he shouted, looking desperately at Saraxa. Her expression remained impassive, but her tail pulsed erratically, betraying her inner turmoil. "The tail bond cannot interfere with the challenge," Vel stated, noticing his glance. "Saraxa is bound to protect you from external threats, not from the consequences of your own challenge." Lucas turned his attention to the puzzle, his mind racing. The holographic components continued, their hypnotic dance patterns emerging and dissolving before he could fully grasp them. The floor grew hotter beneath his feet, forcing him to shift his weight continuously. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the distraction of the heat and the watching crowd. Something about the puzzle seemed familiar. Its movements reminded him of the quantum calibration sequences he worked with as an engineer. The patterns weren't random. They followed a predictable progression based on their starting position. His eyes snapped open. "It's a variant of a Fibonacci sequence," he muttered to himself, but with a visual component. Working quickly, Lucas manipulated the holographic interface, reordering components not by their apparent position, but by their luminosity. As he suspected, when arranged by their brightness values, the pieces formed a recognizable pattern, one that matched the ceremonial markings on his chest. With a final adjustment, Lucas locked the components into place. The hologram froze, then collapsed inward, before exploding outward in a brilliant display of light. The heat beneath his feet immediately subsided. "The human has completed the trial of mind," the elder announced, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. Val's tail lashed in irritation. "A simple test. The trial of body will not be so easily overcome." The holographic projection changed, now displaying a series of Kareen warriors, each in a different combat stance. "You will face combat simulations of increasing difficulty," Val explained. "Survive, and you proceed to the final trial." Lucas had received basic combat training as part of his Federation service, but he was an engineer, not a soldier. "This hardly seems fair," he protested. "Fair? is a human concept, Vlad dismissively said. The tail bond cares only for resolution. The first simulation activated a holographic Kareen warrior that moved with uncanny realism. It circled Lucas cautiously, tail glowing with aggressive intent. Lucas took a defensive stance, trying to recall his training. The holographic warrior lunged, its movements blindingly fast. Lucas barely managed to dodge, feeling the displacement of air as the simulation passed through him. Simulations cannot cause physical harm, the Elder explained, but contact registers as a defeat. That was small comfort as Lucas continued to evade the increasingly complex attack patterns. He noticed that each simulation followed a specific sequence, predictable if one knew what to look for. It was like a complex engineering problem, only with his body as the solution medium. As the difficulty increased, Lucas found himself back toward the edge of the platform. In desperation, he attempted a counter-move, ducking under a swing and pivoting behind the simulation to his surprise. The holographic warrior dissipated. "Interesting," Verrill commented. "The human uses our own momentum against us, a tactic we teach our youngest warriors." Lucas continued through 5 more simulations, each more difficult than the last. By the final opponent, he was exhausted. His reflexes slowing, the simulation landed a glancing blow to his shoulder, and Lucas stumbled before the holographic warrior could press its advantage. Lucas dropped to the floor and swept his leg in a wide arc, a move he'd seen Sarah use during their transport to the temple when she dispatched an overzealous worshipper. The simulation, unprepared for the human adaptation of a Karine technique, failed to adjust and dissipated upon contact. "The human has completed the trial of body," the Elder announced, genuine astonishment in her voice. Lucas stood, breathing heavily, his marked skin glistening with sweat. He glanced at Saraxa and saw something new in her expression, a calculating assessment, as if seeing him for the first time. VL's tail lashed violently. "The final trial will not be overcome so easily. The trial of spirit tests that which humans lack, true connection to forces beyond themselves." The holographic projection shifted, creating a barrier around Lucas, obscuring him from the assembly. Within this private space, he faced a projection of Saraxa, her tail glowing softly. "What is this?" he asked, though he knew the projection couldn't answer. "The trial of spirit requires truth," came Val's voice from beyond the barrier. "You must confront that which the tail bond has revealed about your soul." The projection of Saraxa approached Lucas, her movements fluid and graceful. When she spoke, the voice was not hers, but seemed to come from within Lucas's own mind. "Why did you truly notice my tail, human?" Lucas blinked in confusion. "It was glowing. It caught my attention. Many things glow. Many beings have appendages. You noticed mine. Why?" Lucas struggled to articulate something he hadn't consciously considered. It was beautiful, alive in a way that seemed to express something words couldn't. The projection circled him. "And what do you seek from the tail bond?" "I didn't seek anything. It was an accident. There are no accidents in matters of spirit. The tail bond formed because something in you called to something in Saracle. What was it?" Lucas thought back to the moment in the diplomatic chamber, trying to recall his exact state of mind. "I felt constrained by protocol, by expectations. I saw her standing there, rigid and controlled, but with this tail that seemed to express everything she was hiding. I responded to that authenticity." The projection stopped before him, its silver eyes penetrating. "And now that you are bound, what do you desire to survive? Obviously beyond survival. What do you want from the bond?" Lucas hesitated, then spoke from instinct rather than calculation. "Freedom for both of us. She's trapped by this ritual, just as I'm trapped by my mistake. I want us both to be free of it." The projection's tail brightens significantly. Freedom is not the purpose of the tail bond. It binds. It does not release. "Then maybe that's what's wrong with it," Lucas replied, surprising himself with his vehemence. "A bond should strengthen, not imprison. It should be chosen, not imposed." The projection reached out, placing a hand on Lucas's chest directly over one of the ceremonial markings. "You would remake our traditions according to human values?" "No. I would ask if your traditions still serve their original purpose. Does the tail bond bring honor or just obligation? Does it reveal truth or just enforce compliance?" The projection's form flickered, its expression shifting to one of uncertainty. "These questions, they are not part of the trial." "Then maybe they should be," Lucas insisted. "If the trial of spirit is about truth, then here's mine. I believe Sarah deserves better than being bound to a ritual that uses her as a prop in someone else's political agenda." The barrier surrounding Lucas suddenly dissolved, revealing the assembly. All eyes were on him, expressions ranging from shock to outrage. Val's tail was a furious blaze of light. "The human has failed the trial of spirit," Val declared. "He rejects our most sacred traditions. The penalty is death." "No." Saraxa's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "He has not failed. He has revealed a truth the trial was designed to uncover." Varl turned to her, his expression thunderous. "You overstep, Flame Guardian. Your bond compromises your judgment. The trial bond grants me the right to interpret the challenger's spirit." Saraxa countered, stepping onto the platform beside Lucas. "That is the ancient law, Commander. Would you now disregard it for political convenience?" A murmur spread through the assembly. Varl's tail lashed in frustration as he recognized the trap. To deny Saraxa's right would be to undermine the very traditions he claimed to defend. Speak. Then he conceded, with barely contained fury, interpret the human spirit for the assembly. Saraxa turned to face the gathered Kareen, her tail now pulsing in a steady, controlled rhythm. Lucas Cade spoke truth. The tail bond has revealed his spirit, one that questions not out of disrespect, but out of concern for authentic purpose. His challenge to our traditions is not rejection, but invitation to remember why they exist. She turned to Lucas, her silver eyes meeting his directly for the first time since the bond formed the trial of. Spirit asks what lies beneath surface thoughts in the human. I sensed no malice, no conquest, no desire to diminish. I sensed instead a recognition of connection, the very essence the tail bond was created to honor. VL stepped forward. Pretty words, sir, but the law requires resolution. If you claim he has passed the trials, then the challenge must be completed through combat. You must face him as tradition demands. Lucas looked at Sarah in alarm. What does that mean? It means, Brawl answered with grim satisfaction, that Saraxa must now fight you to the death. The bond will be resolved when one of you falls. That's absurd, Lucas protested. She's been protecting me this entire time. Now she has to kill me? Such is the paradox of the tail bond, the elder explained. The guardian must ultimately test the worthiness of the one they guard. Only through combat can the true nature of the bond be revealed. Sarax's expression remained unreadable, but her tail's pulsing had become erratic. I accept the final challenge, she stated formally. Val's satisfaction was evident as he stepped back. Let the combat commence at dawn tomorrow. The human will be returned to holding. Until then, Saraxa, you will undergo the ritual of separation to prepare your spirit. As guards moved to escort Lucas away, he caught Saraxa's eye one last time. Something passed between them, an unspoken communication that transcended their brief acquaintance. Her tail flared briefly, and in that moment, Lucas understood that whatever happened tomorrow, Saraxa was no longer simply following a ritual. She was making a choice. The holding cell was different this time, located within the temple complex and adorned with the same bioluminescent crystals that pervaded Karin's sacred spaces. Lucas paced the small room, the ceremonial markings on his skin still glowing faintly in the dim light. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them pleasant. He had survived the trials only to face combat with the one person who had protected him. The absurdity of it would be comical if it weren't so potentially fatal. The door opened silently, revealing not a guard, but Ambassador Tanner, her expression grim as she entered, casting furtive glances behind her. I don't have much time, she said in a hushed tone. The Federation is preparing an extraction team. We'll get you out before dawn, Lucas. Blinked in surprise. You're going to break me out? Won't that violate the treaty? The treaty has already been compromised. For Real is using this ritual as a pretense to provoke conflict. Intelligence suggests he's been planning this for months. You just happen to provide the perfect opportunity. But what about Sarah? The tail bond. Tanner's expression hardened. She is Karin Lucas. Her loyalty is to her people and their traditions. Whatever connection you think exists between you is a biological anomaly, not a true bond. Lucas wasn't so sure. The look they had shared the unspoken communication. It felt real in a way that transcended mere biology. What happens to her if I just disappear? That's not our concern, Tanner replied, checking a small device on her wrist. The extraction team will be in position in 3 hours. Be ready to move quickly and quietly. After she left, Lucas sat on the edge of the sleeping platform, conflicted. Escape meant survival, but it also meant abandoning Saraxa to whatever consequences would befall her from what little he understood of Karin culture. The failure to complete a tail bond ritual would bring tremendous shame. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft sound at the door. It opened to reveal a young Karin attendant, barely past adolescence, judging by the shorter length of their tail. You are the human bound to Flame Guardian Saraxa? The youth asked, voice barely above a whisper. Lucas nodded cautiously. The attendant glanced nervously down the corridor before entering and closing the door. I bring a message. The Flame Guardian requests your presence at the ancestral pool. She has questions that must be answered. Answered before dawn is this part of the ritual. The young Karin's tail flickered anxiously. No, it is forbidden for the bound to meet before combat, but Sarakvel insists it is necessary for proper resolution. Lucas considered his options. This could be a trap, or it could be his only chance to understand what was really happening between them. How do I get there without being seen? The attendant produced a cloak made of the same light-absorbing material as the ceremonial armor. This will shield you from casual observation. The temple passages are less guarded during the night of preparation. I can guide you through the lesser-known ways, wrapping the cloak around himself. Lucas followed the young Kareen through a series of narrow corridor and hidden passages. They moved in silence. The attendant's tail dimmed to the barest glow for navigation. Eventually, they arrived at a secluded chamber deep within the temple complex. Unlike the grand ceremonial spaces, this room was intimate, dominated by a small pool similar to the one Lucas had been purified in, but with water that glowed with a deeper blue luminescence. Saraxa stood at the edge of the pool, her back to the entrance. She had removed her armor, wearing only a simple shift that left her arms and shoulders bare. Her tail pulsed with a gentle rhythm that reflected in the water's surface. "Leave us," she said without turning, clearly aware of their arrival. The young attendant bowed and retreated, closing the door behind them. "You took a risk coming here," Lucas said, removing the concealing cloak. Saraxa turned to face him. Without her armor, she seemed both more vulnerable and more imposing, her natural presence no longer constrained by ceremonial trappings. "The tail bond demands truth between the bound," she said. Said tomorrow's combat would be meaningless without it. "About that combat," Lucas began, "is there any way there is no circumvention?" She interrupted. "The ritual must be completed, even if it means one of us dies." Saraka approached him, her movement fluid and graceful. "Death is not the only resolution, though it is the one Val seeks. What other option is there?" She gestured to the pool. "The ancestral waters reveal paths hidden from ordinary sight. I have spent hours in communion seeking understanding of this bond between us." "And what did you learn?" "It is unique. The tail bond usually forms between Kareen warriors as a test of dominance or between potential mates. Never in our recorded history has it formed with an off-worlder." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Lucky me." "This is not a matter for your human humor," she admonished, though her tail flickered in what might have been amusement. "It means the bond has formed for a purpose our traditions have not accounted for." "What purpose?" Sarax's silver eyes studied him intently. "That is what I must determine. The waters showed me fragments of potential futures branching from tomorrow's combat. In some, you die. In others, I do. But in one, something changes." She moved closer, close enough that Lucas could see the fine scales that lined her neck and shoulders, each one containing a minute amount of the same bioluminescence as her tail. "Your words during the trial of spirit," she continued. "You spoke of freedom, of choice over obligation. These concepts are not unknown to Kareen, but they are. Not being centered in our traditions as they are in yours, is that a bad thing? It is disruptive. Our society values order, continuity, the preservation of ancient ways. Change comes slowly, if at all. Sometimes disruption is necessary for growth." Lucas suggested Sarah's tale brightened a dangerous philosophy, but not necessarily wrong. She studied him for a long moment, then gestured to the pool. "Remove your garments and enter the water with me. The ancestral waters may show us the path forward." Lucas hesitated. "Is this another ritual I don't understand?" "This is older than ritual," she replied. "It is communion. The waters connect us to the collective memory of my people. Through them, we may glimpse the true purpose of our bond." Deciding that he had little to lose at this point, Lucas removed the ceremonial wrap and stepped into the pool. The water was warmer than he expected and seemed to embrace him, tiny motes of bioluminescence swirling around his body like curious spirits. Saraxa entered from the opposite side, her shift dissolving into the water as if it had never been material at all. The glow of her tail intensified, sending Hungon song an sang, xuyên qua hồ bơi, đồng bộ, với ánh sáng tự nhiên của nước. Giờ sao? Lucas hỏi, cảm thấy bình tĩnh lạ thường dù hoàn cảnh kỳ lạ. Giờ chúng ta lắng nghe, Saraxa đáp, duỗi hai tay lên bề mặt nước. Đặt tay lên tay tôi và nhắm mắt lại. Hãy để nước nói. Lucas complied, resting his palms against hers. The moment their skin touched, a jolt of energy passed between them, and the water around them began to glow more intensely. With his eyes closed, Lucas suddenly found himself experiencing memories that were not his own, fleeting glimpses of a life lived among the stars, training in ancient Kareen martial disciplines, the weight of tradition and expectation pressing down through generations. He saw Saraxa as a child, her tail barely glowing, being selected for the path of the Flame Guardian. He felt her pride, her dedication, but also her private doubts, questions she dared not voice about the purpose of traditions that seemed increasingly removed from the realities of a changing galaxy. The vision shifted, and Lucas realized Saraxa was likely experienced in his memories as well. His childhood on Earth, his rebellion against rigid educational structures, his choice to become an engineer despite pressure to follow a more prestigious path. The exchange deepened, moving beyond memory into something more fundamental. Core values, beliefs, fears, hopes. It was the most intimate experience Lucas had ever had, transcending physical or even emotional connection to touch something elemental through this communion. He began to understand the true nature of the tail bond. It wasn't merely a biological reaction or a cultural tradition. It was an evolutionary mechanism for profound understanding between individuals. In the ancient past, it had served as a way for Kareen to bridge seemingly irreconcilable differences, to find common ground where none seemed possible. Over time, the ritual aspects had calcified around this core purpose, obscuring its original function. What had, once a path to greater unity, had become a tool for maintaining hierarchy and tradition. The revelation hit both of them simultaneously. Lucas felt Sarah's shock ripple through the water, her tail flaring with the intensity of her realization. Their eyes opened, gazing at each other across the glowing pool with new understanding. The bond was never meant to end in death, Sarah whispered, her voice carrying the weight of ancient knowledge. It was meant to transform. Transform what? Lucas asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The bound, and through them, their worlds. She withdrew her hand slowly, the connection between them fading, but not disappearing entirely. The first tail bonds formed during our Great Division, when our ancestors were on the verge of destroying themselves through conflict. It created understanding where words had failed. Lucas processed this information, so the combat tomorrow is a corruption of the original purpose, Saraxa confirmed. A way to channel the transformative power of the bond into reinforcing existing power structures rather than challenging them. Varel knows this. No few do. The knowledge has been lost or deliberately obscured, but the waters remember, and now so do we. Lucas moved closer to her in the pool, the water swirling around them in patterns that seemed almost sentient. So what do we do with this knowledge? Varel still expects us to fight to the death at dawn. Sarax's expression became resolute. We will enter the combat circle as expected. But we will not give Varel the resolution he seeks. What will we do instead? Her tale brightened with determination. We will remember the true purpose of the tail bond, and we will show my people what it means to choose transformation over tradition. As dawn approached, Lucas was escorted from his holding cell to the combat arena, an ancient amphitheater carved into the living rock beneath the temple complex. Unlike the ceremonial chamber of the previous day, this space felt primal, its walls rough-hewn and illuminated only by natural bioluminescence that seeped from veins in the stone. The assembled Kareen were fewer in number, but higher in rank. Elders, commanders, and religious leaders gathered to witness the resolution of this unprecedented tail bond. Commander Val stood at the center of the arena, his ceremonial armor now augmented with weapons that gleamed in the dim light. "The human challenger approaches," announced the elder from the previous day. "Let him enter the circle of resolution." Lucas stepped forward, still wearing only the ceremonial wrap from the trials. The markings on his skin had faded somewhat, but still caught the light, creating patterns that seemed to move with his breathing. "Where is Sarah?" he asked, noticing her absence. "The Flame Guardian undergoes final preparation," Val replied. "She will join us momentarily." Lucas took his position in the circle, acutely aware of the expectant gazes fixed upon him. The communion in the ancestral pool had changed something fundamental in his understanding, but he still wasn't certain what Sarah intended. How could they transform a ritual of combat into something else entirely? A hushed murmur spread through the assembly as Sarah entered the arena. She wore her full ceremonial armor, but with one significant difference. Parts of it had been removed to expose her scales and patterns that matched the markings on Lucas's skin. Her tail glowed with steady purpose, neither dimmed nor flaring. The bound guardian approaches. In tone, the elder let her enter the circle of resolution. Saraxa took her position opposite Lucas, her silver eyes meeting his with quiet intensity. Something passed between them, an unspoken confirmation of their shared understanding. "The ritual of combat will now commence," declared for all, satisfaction evident in his voice. "It will end only when one combatant yields or falls." An attendant approached bearing a tray with 2 ceremonial weapons, blades that pulsed with the same bioluminescence as the Kareen tails. "Choose your blade, human," Val instructed, "though it matters little which you select. Both are equally lethal in the hands of a flame guardian." Lucas selected one of the blades, feeling its unusual weight and balance. It seemed alive in his grip, responding to his touch with pulses of light that synchronized with his heartbeat. Saraxa took the remaining weapon, her experienced hands adjusting to its contours with practiced ease. "The combat begins on my signal," Varel announced, stepping back to the edge of the circle. "May the worthier spirit prevail." He raised his hand, then brought it down sharply. "Begin." Saraxa moved with blinding speed, covering the distance between them in a heartbeat. Her blade flashed toward Lucas's throat, stopping a hair's breadth from contact. The assembly gasped collectively, anticipating the immediate end of the human. But Lucas hadn't flinched. He stood perfectly still, eyes locked with Saraxa's, absolute trust evident in his posture. "I yield," he stated clearly, his voice carrying through the arena. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the assembly. Varel stepped forward, his tail lashing with irritation. "The human cannot yield before combat has truly begun," he protested. "It violates the spirit of the ritual." The spirit of the ritual is transformation, not death, Saraxa countered, lowering her blade. I accept his yield. Unacceptable, Vel's voice rose in anger. The Tailbond demands blood resolution. The Tailbond demands. Truth, Saraka replied calmly. And the truth is that this human has shown more understanding of our ways through his willingness to yield than many who were born to them. She turned to address the assembly directly. The first Tailbond was not a battle for dominance. It was a bridge between divided souls. Our ancestors used it to prevent destruction, not to cause it. Blasphemy, hissed Val. You have been corrupted by the human's influence. I have been awakened by it, Saraka corrected, as were our ancestors when they first discovered the bond. It reveals truth, Commander, even truths we would rather not face. She laid her blade on the ground and turned her back on Varel, a gesture of profound significance in Kareen culture. I reject the corruption of the Tailbond's purpose. I choose transformation over tradition. Varel's face contorted with fury. Then you choose exile, Sarak. No Flame Guardian has ever abandoned the sacred combat. Perhaps it is time one did, she replied, without turning. The assembly had fallen into shocked silence. The elder stepped forward, her ancient face troubled. The ritual cannot end. Without resolution, she stated, if you reject combat, after accepting the challenge, there is only one alternative. Saraxa nodded solemnly. I am aware of the price. Lucas looked between them in confusion. What price? What's happening? If Saraxa refuses to complete the combat ritual, the elder explained, she must sever the bond herself by cutting off her tail. Horror washed over Lucas as he understood the implications. But that's the ultimate sacrifice, Saraxa finished for him. A Karine without a tail loses not only status, but connection to our ancestral memory. It is considered a living death. You can't do that, Lucas protested. Not for me. Saraxa finally turned to face him, her expression serene despite the gravity of the moment. Not for you, Lucas Cade. For truth, for choice, for the future of my people. She extended her hand, and an attendant placed a ceremonial dagger in her palm. Unlike the combat blades, this one did not glow, but seemed to absorb light, its edge impossibly sharp. Wait, Lucas said desperately. There has to be another way. There is not, she replied softly. But perhaps there will be for those who come after us. Before anyone could intervene, Saraxa brought the blade down in a swift, decisive motion, severing her tail at its base. Blue, luminescent fluid sprayed from the wound, spattering across the arena floor in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate, matching the ceremonial markings that adorned both their bodies. A collective gasp rose from the assembly. Veal stepped back involuntarily, his expression one of horrified disbelief. Saraxa remained standing, though her body trembled with the shock of the severance. The severed tail continued to glow on the ground, its light pulsing with gradually decreasing intensity. It is done. The elder pronounced, her voice heavy with emotion. The bond is broken. Sarak is no longer a flame guardian. The human is released from the challenge. Lucas rushed to Sarax's side as she swayed unsteadily. Why? He whispered, supporting her weight. Why go so far? Her silver eyes, now dulled with pain, met his. Because some traditions must end for new ones to begin. The water showed me possibilities, futures where Kareen and humans find common ground. But first someone had to break the cycle. Vlacht, his initial shock giving way to calculated assessment, said, "You have made your choice, Saraxa. You are now tailless, no longer Kareen in the eyes of our law. You will be exiled from our territories and struck from our records." "I accept this consequence," she replied with dignity, despite her pain. "And you, human," Veal continued, turning to Lucas, "you are released from the bond. But know this, your presence on Kine worlds is no longer welcome. Return to your Federation and tell them what happens to those who disrespect our ways." Lucas met. His gaze steadily. "I'll tell them what happens when someone chooses freedom over fear, when they value connection over control." He helped Saraxa stand straighter, supporting her as they prepared to leave the arena. "And I'll make sure they know it was a Karen who taught me that lesson." As they walked away, leaving the severed tail still glowing on the arena floor, the young attendant who had guided Lucas to the ancestral pool slipped from the shadows to follow them. "The sacred texts speak of renewal after sacrifice," the youth whispered as they reached the exit. "They say that what is freely given can return in new form." Saraxa glanced at the young Kareen. "Those texts are forbidden to acolytes." A faint smile crossed the attendant's face. "Yet I read them anyway. Perhaps I too question traditions." "Then remember what you witnessed here today," Saraxa told them. "And when the time comes, choose wisely." The aftermath unfolded with surprising speed. Ambassador Tanner, who had been preparing an extraction team, instead found herself negotiating for Lucas's peaceful departure, along with the now exiled Saraxa. The Federation, sensing both diplomatic risk and opportunity, arranged for transport to a neutral medical facility where Saraxa could receive treatment for her self-inflicted wound. Lucas remained by her side throughout, helping her adjust to the profound physical and neurological changes caused by the loss of her tail. Served not only as expressions of emotion, but as important balance organs and sensory appendages. Without hers, Saraxa had to relearn basic movements, her once fluid grace now replaced by careful, deliberate steps. "You could have returned to your posting," she observed one evening, as they sat in the medical facility's garden, watching the unfamiliar stars of a neutral system. "Yet you stay." "The tail bond may be severed," Lucas replied, "but the connection remains, or at least I think it does." Saraxa considered this, her hand unconsciously moving to the now healed wound where her tail had been. "The physical bond is gone, but what we experienced in the ancestral waters transcended biology. So what happens now? You're exiled from your people. I've been reassigned pending evaluation of cultural sensitivity, according to the official report. Now we choose," she said simply, "as I chose in the arena as you chose when you yielded rather than fought." Lucas smiled. Remembering their shared vision in the waters, the first step toward transformation. Yes, though the path ahead is unclear. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from Lucas's communication device. A message had arrived from a secure Federation channel, unusual for someone in his currently ambiguous status. The message contained only coordinates and a time, along with a symbol Lucas recognized as belonging to a specialized division of Federation intelligence that dealt with interspecies cultural exchange. "Interesting," he murmured. showing Saraxa the message. A trap? She suggested, her warrior's instincts still sharp despite her exile. Or an opportunity? The division that sent this specializes in cultural bridge building, the kind of work that might benefit from our unique experience. Saraka's expression remained guarded. My people will not welcome interference in their traditions. Maybe not, but other Karene might be questioning those traditions, just as you did. The young attendants certainly was. True. And if our experience in the waters revealed anything, it's that the original purpose of the tail bond was to create understanding, not enforce separation. Lucas stood, offering his hand to help Saraka rise, a gesture she had reluctantly become accustomed to as she adapted to her new balance. What do you say? Should we see what the Federation wants? She took his hand, rising with careful dignity. We have already sacrificed much for truth. It would be wasteful not to use what we've learned. 3 years later, at an outpost on the edge of Kareen space, a small vessel docked without fanfare. Its occupants, a human male and a tailless Kareen female, were met by a delegation of young Kareen, each wearing a distinctive emblem, a stylized representation of a severed tail, reimagined as a flame taking new shape. Saraxil greeted the leader of the group, a now mature version of the attendant who had once guided Lucas to the ancestral pool. Your journey inspires us. I am no longer Vel Saraxa, corrected gently. That name belonged to my lineage, which has disowned me. Then how shall we address you? Saraxa glanced at Lucas, a subtle smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I have taken a new name, as is the right of the transformed. I am Saraka Kaid. Now the young Kareen's eyes widened in understanding. You have formed a bond with the human. Without a tail, I have. Discovered that true bonds transcend physical form, Saraka replied, as our ancestors always knew before. Tradition obscured wisdom. Lucas stepped forward. We've come because we heard your group has been asking questions about the original purpose of the tail bond, about transformation, rather than tradition. The young leader nodded. Many of us have felt constrained. The rigid adherence to ancient ways prevents us from adapting to a changing galaxy. Your act of sacrifice showed us another path might be possible. It's not an easy path, Saraka cautioned. Questioning tradition comes at a cost. All growth does, the young. Kareen replied, but we are prepared to pay it already. Our symbol appears on worlds throughout Kareen. Space, small acts of quiet rebellion against rigidity. Lucas looked around at the gathering, noticing how each young Kareen's tail glowed with a unique pattern, individualized rather than conforming to the regimented displays of traditional Kareen society. We've brought something that might help your understanding, he said, producing a data crystal information about the original tail bond rituals recovered from ancient Kareen texts that were thought lost. The leader accepted the crystal reverently. How did you obtain this? The Federation has resources, Lucas replied with a smile, and a vested interest in improved relations with the Kareen. Our special division believes cultural understanding begins with recognizing the original intent behind traditions, not just their current form. Saraxa stepped forward, placing her hand on the crystal. What you do with this knowledge is your choice. We offer it freely. Without expectation or demand, just as you freely gave your tail, the young leader observed, yes, because some sacrifices create more than they destroy. As the meeting continued, Another Kareen approached, this one older and bearing the insignia of a mid-level governmental official. "Is it true," he asked Saraxa directly, "that you found enlightenment in severing your tail?" "Not in the severing itself," she corrected, "but in choosing my own path rather than one dictated by others." The tail was simply the physical manifestation of that choice. The official studied her closely. There are whispers in the High Council. Commander Val's influence wanes as younger voices question the wisdom of rigid adherence to traditions whose origins have been forgotten. "And what do you think, Lucas?" asked a faint smile crossed the official's face. "I think that a tradition that cannot withstand questioning was never truly strong to begin with." As night fell, Lucas and Saraxa stood on the observation deck of the outpost watching the stars below them. The gathering of young Kareen had grown as word spread of their arrival. "Do you ever regret it?" Lucas asked quietly, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "Giving up everything for a principle." Saraxa turned to him, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. "I gave up a tail. I gained a universe of possibilities." Her free hand moved to the base of her spine where her tail had once been. "Sometimes I still feel it. Phantom sensations, as if it were still there. The doctor said that might happen. Neural pathways don't forget easily. It's not just neural," she replied thoughtfully. "In the ancestral waters, I saw that the tail is merely one expression of something deeper, our connection to each other, to our past and future. That connection doesn't vanish with the physical form." Lucas nodded, remembering their shared vision. The Kareen believed that energy transforms, but never truly disappears. "Exactly. My tail's energy didn't vanish. It changed shape." She looked down at the gathering below, where the young Karen were displaying their individualized tail patterns in what appeared to be a new form of ritual. It became this: movement, a choice. Saraxa squeezed his hand, the same choice you made when you said those fateful words in the diplomatic chamber. Lucas laughed softly. "Cute tail hardly seemed like a profound choice at the time you spoke authentically, in a space where everyone else was performing. You saw beyond the ritual." To the being beneath her expression grew serious. That is what the original tail bond was meant to reveal. The truth beyond the surface below them. One of the young Kareen had begun recounting the story of Saraxa's choice to newcomers. Lucas caught fragments of the narrative, noticing how it had already taken on mythic qualities in the retelling. "They're turning us into legends," he observed with mild discomfort. "People need stories to make sense of change," Saraxa replied. "Our personal choice has become something larger, a symbol for others questioning their own bonds." "Speaking of bonds," Lucas said, reaching into his pocket, "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment." He produced a small object that glowed, with a familiar blue luminescence, a ring crafted from a material that pulsed in rhythm with Sorax's heartbeat. "In human tradition, this symbolizes a chosen bond," he explained, "not imposed by biology or culture, but selected freely." Saraxa examined the ring with wonder. "It glows like your tail did. The material is synthesized from the same bioluminescent compounds. It won't replace what you lost, but perhaps it can symbolize what we found." She slipped the ring onto her finger, watching as it adjusted to fit perfectly. "Among Karen, we believe that what is meant to be bound will find its way, regardless of obstacles. A convenient belief for someone who started an interstellar cultural revolution with a severed tail, Lucas teased gently. Sarax's laugh, still a rare sound, filled the observation deck. Perhaps, or perhaps it is simply truth revealed when we have the courage to look beyond tradition. As they stood together under the stars, the ring on Sarax's finger pulsed with light, creating patterns that danced across their joined hands. Below, the gathered Kareen noticed the glow and fell silent, recognizing it as something both familiar and entirely new. Like a transformed, cute tale, Saraka murmured, echoing the words that had started their journey. Lucas smiled. Powerful choice, he replied, completing the circuit of their shared transformation. The light between them grew brighter, illuminating not just their present moment, but casting its glow toward a future where bonds were chosen, not imposed, where tradition served life rather than constraining it. Somewhere in the great beyond, the ancestors of the Karen witnessed their descendants' choice and recognized it, the original spirit of the tailwind, not to bind through obligation, but to connect through understanding. The flame hadn't been extinguished, it had simply changed shape.